Dr. Maya Rivers was no stranger to airports. As the CEO of a booming tech company, she spent more time in terminals than at home. Her life revolved around meetings, conferences, and making big decisions that shaped industries. But today, she wasn't thinking about any of that. Today it was just another flight, a routine trip from one city to another. She walked into the airport with her usual confidence, dressed in a sharp navy blue suit, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She carried herself like someone who knew exactly where she was going. In her hand was her boarding pass already printed and ready, first class as always. It wasn't about showing off. It was about practicality. Long flights were exhausting, and first class gave her space to work or rest without distractions. Maya approached the gate, wheeling her carry-on behind her. The line moved quickly, and soon it was her turn to step up to the counter. She handed over her boarding pass with a polite smile, expecting the usual nod and wave through. Instead, the gate agent hesitated. Let me check this," the agent said, frowning slightly. They tapped on their keyboard, then glanced back at Maya. "There seems to be an issue with your reservation." "An issue?" Maya raised an eyebrow. That couldn't be right. She pulled out her phone and opened the confirmation email. Everything looked perfect. Her name, her seat number, her ticket type. First class, aisle seat, row 3. No mistakes here. "I'm sorry," the agent continued, avoiding eye contact. "But I can't let you board until we resolve this." "Resolve what?" Maya felt irritation bubbling beneath her calm exterior. This had never happened before. She traveled with this airline. All the time, they knew her. Or at least they should have. While she stood there trying to understand what was happening, something caught her attention. A man walked up behind her, holding a boarding pass. His ticket clearly showed economy seating, but when he reached the desk, the agent greeted him warmly. "Oh, congratulations on the upgrade," the agent chirped, handing him a new boarding pass. Just like that, he was waved through to first class. Maya stared at the scene, disbelief washing over her. Was this really happening? Here she was, standing with proof of her first-class ticket, being told there was a problem while a complete stranger got upgraded without question. Something didn't add up. She leaned forward, keeping her voice steady but firm. "Can you explain why my reservation is suddenly an issue?" "My ticket is valid and I've been traveling with you for years. What's going on?" The gate agent shifted uncomfortably, mumbling something about needing further verification. Maya pressed again, asking if this was standard procedure. The answer came back vague and evasive. By now, a small crowd had gathered nearby. Some passengers whispered among themselves, shaking their heads. Others watched curiously, wondering what the holdup was. One woman even muttered, "That's not fair," loud enough for Maya to hear. Fairness, or the lack of it, was exactly what this situation screamed. And Maya knew it wasn't just about her. It was about every person who might face similar treatment because of how they looked or where they came from. She took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay composed. Losing her temper wouldn't solve anything, but silence wasn't an option either. With quiet determination, she decided to take matters into her own hands. Pulling out her phone, she hit record. If the airline wanted to play games, fine, but the world needed to see what was really going on. "This is unacceptable," she said aloud, addressing both the agent and the growing audience around her. "I've done nothing wrong, yet I'm being treated like a second-class citizen. Why? Because I'm black? Because I'm a woman? You tell me." Her words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. For a moment, the gate area fell silent. Even the agent stopped typing, looking unsure of what to do next. Maya didn't wait for a response. She had made her point, and she wasn't done yet. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning. The tension at the gate was thick enough to cut with a knife. Maya stood there, her phone still recording, her eyes locked on the gate agent who seemed to shrink under her steady gaze. Passengers continued to trickle in, some stopping to watch the unfolding drama while others tried to avoid the awkwardness altogether. A few whispered among themselves, their voices low but unmistakable. "This is ridiculous," one man muttered to his companion. "She's clearly got her ticket." "What's the holdup?" Another woman chimed in, shaking her head. "It's always something like this. Never happens to people who look like us." Maya heard them, but she didn't react. She kept her focus on the agent, who now looked flustered and unsure of what to do next. The agent mumbled something about needing to confirm her reservation again, even though Maya had already shown multiple proofs. It was clear they were stalling, hoping she'd back down or give up. But Maya wasn't that kind of person. She didn't back down easily, not when it came to fairness. "I've shown you everything you need," Maya said firmly, leaning slightly over the counter. Her tone was calm, but there was steel beneath it. "My boarding pass, my confirmation, email, my ID. Everything checks out. So why am I still standing here while someone else gets upgraded without any issues?" The agent opened their mouth to respond but hesitated. Instead, they reached for the phone beside them and called for a supervisor. "Hold on, ma'am," they said, avoiding eye contact. "Let me get someone higher up to assist you." Maya crossed her arms, tapping her foot lightly against the floor. She could feel the weight of everyone's stares, the curious glances, the sympathetic looks, and yes, a few judgmental ones too. Some passengers probably thought she was making a scene, but deep down she knew better. This wasn't about causing trouble. It was about standing up for herself and calling out behavior that shouldn't be tolerated. A few minutes later, a man in a neatly pressed uniform appeared. He introduced himself as the supervisor and gave Maya a tight smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I understand there's been some confusion with your reservation?" he asked, his tone polite but dismissive. Maya took a step closer, meeting him head-on. "Confusion? No, there hasn't been any confusion. My reservation is valid. I have all the documentation right here." She gestured toward her phone, which displayed the confirmation email in black and white. "But instead of letting me board like everyone else, I'm being singled out. And frankly, it feels intentional." The supervisor glanced at the screen briefly before shaking his head. "Ma'am, I apologize for the inconvenience, but we can't allow you to board until we verify your ticket further. It's company policy." "Company policy?" Maya repeated, raising an eyebrow. "So you're telling me that policy only applies to certain passengers? Because the gentleman behind me just walked straight into first class after getting an upgrade. No questions asked. Why does he get treated differently?" The supervisor shifted uncomfortably, his polished demeanor cracking ever so slightly. "Each case is unique," he replied lamely, avoiding her question entirely. Maya let out a short laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Unique? That's funny, because it seems pretty consistent to me. Unique means making exceptions based on merit or circumstance. This feels more like discrimination." Her words hit hard, and the crowd around them grew quieter. Even the other passengers waiting to board had stopped pretending not to listen. One older woman nodded approvingly, while a young man nearby muttered, "She's got a point." Realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, the supervisor tried to regain authority. "Look, ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we may have to escalate this further. Delaying the flight will affect everyone here." Maya tilted her head, her expression unchanging. "Are you threatening me?" she asked coolly. "Because delaying the flight isn't my fault, it's yours. You're the one refusing to honor a valid ticket. If anyone should be held accountable, it's you." The supervisor clenched his jaw, clearly frustrated but unable to argue. Behind him, the gate agent shuffled nervously, glancing at the growing line of passengers waiting to board. The clock was ticking and the delay was becoming impossible to ignore. Maya decided to press her advantage. She pulled out her phone again, scrolling through her contacts until she found the number she needed. Before dialing, she turned to the supervisor and said, "You're making a big mistake. I hope you realize that before it's too late." The supervisor blinked, confused. "Who are you calling?" Instead of answering, Maya simply pressed the call button and held the phone to her ear. The room fell silent once more, every pair of eyes glued to her. Whatever happened next would determine whether she boarded that plane or brought the entire operation to a grinding halt. As the phone rang, Maya locked eyes with the supervisor. There was no fear in her gaze, only determination. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting for every person who had ever been treated unfairly because of their race or gender. And she wasn't going to stop until justice was served. The call connected, and Maya began speaking. Her voice was calm but commanding, each word carrying the weight of someone who refused to be silenced. What she said next would change everything, for her, for the airline, and for everyone watching. The phone rang twice before someone picked up on the other end. Maya didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Hello," she said, her voice steady but firm. "I need to speak with you urgently. It's about something that just happened at one of your gates." On the other end of the line was a senior executive, someone high enough in the corporate ladder to understand the gravity of what Maya was about to say. She had dealt with this person before, not as a friend, but as a professional peer. Their paths had crossed during industry events, and though they weren't close, there was mutual respect between them. "Of course," the executive replied, sensing the urgency in her tone. "What's going on?" Maya took a deep breath, then laid out the entire situation. She explained how she had been denied boarding despite having a valid first-class ticket. She described the gate agent's hesitation, the supervisor's dismissive attitude, and the blatant double standards she witnessed when another passenger, a white man, was allowed to board without issue. Her words were measured, but the frustration behind them was impossible to miss. "I've traveled with your airline for years," she continued, her voice rising slightly. "I've never had a problem until today. This isn't just about me. It's about how people like me are treated. If this is how you treat a customer who spends thousands of dollars with your company every year, imagine how others are treated." There was a pause on the other end of the line. The executive knew exactly who Maya was. Her reputation preceded her. She wasn't just any traveler. She was a powerhouse CEO, someone whose opinion could sway public perception overnight. More importantly, she was someone who commanded respect because she earned it through hard work and integrity. "I'm sorry to hear that," the executive finally said, their tone shifting from casual curiosity to serious concern. "That's unacceptable. Let me look into this immediately." Maya nodded, even though the executive couldn't see her. "Thank you. But I want more than an apology. This needs to be addressed, not just for me, but for everyone who might face similar treatment in the future." The executive agreed, promising to take swift action. They ended the call, leaving Maya standing in the middle of the gate area with her phone still in hand. The room was eerily quiet now, every eye fixed on her. Passengers exchanged glances, some nodding in approval while others whispered among themselves. Even the supervisor looked uneasy, his polished demeanor cracking under the weight of what he suspected was coming next. Within minutes, the ripple effects of Maya's call began spreading. Somewhere in the airline's headquarters, alarms were going off, metaphorically speaking. Executives scrambled to figure out what had gone wrong and how to fix it before things spiraled further out of control. Emails flew back and forth, meetings were hastily arranged, and phone calls were made to key personnel at the airport. Back at the gate, the atmosphere shifted noticeably. A new employee arrived, a higher-ranking manager who introduced himself with a nervous smile. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Maya directly, "we're very sorry for the inconvenience. We're working to resolve this right away." Maya raised an eyebrow. "Working? Or have you resolved it already?" The manager hesitated, clearly unsure of how much damage control had been done behind the scenes. Before he could respond, another announcement came over the intercom. "Attention passengers, we are experiencing a brief delay due to unforeseen circumstances. Please remain patient as we work to get everyone boarded shortly." Unforeseen circumstances? Maya almost laughed. Everyone around her knew exactly what those circumstances were. The whispers grew louder, and a few passengers started filming the scene on their phones. Social media was about to blow up, and the airline knew it. Meanwhile, the original supervisor, who had tried to brush off Maya's concerns earlier, was nowhere to be seen. Rumors spread among the staff that he had been pulled aside for questioning. Whether he'd face consequences remained to be seen, but one thing was clear. The airline was panicking. Maya watched all of this unfold with a mix of emotions. Part of her felt vindicated. Finally, someone was taking her seriously. But another, part of her felt heavy, burdened by the knowledge that none of this would have happened if she hadn't made that call. If she hadn't leveraged her influence, would they have listened? Probably not. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the air became almost unbearable. Passengers grew restless, checking their watches and muttering complaints about missed connections. Some directed their frustration at the airline staff, while others turned their attention to Maya, wondering what she would do next. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the manager returned. This time his demeanor was different. Gone was the nervousness, instead he carried himself with purpose. He approached Maya and handed her a new boarding pass. "Ma'am, please accept our sincerest apologies. Your seat in first class has been confirmed and will ensure there are no further issues." Maya glanced at the boarding pass, then back at the manager. "It's not just about my seat," she said quietly, her voice carrying a weight that silenced everyone within earshot. "This isn't the first time something like this has happened, and it won't be the last unless real changes are made. You can apologize all you want, but actions matter more than words." The manager nodded solemnly. "We understand, ma'am. Rest assured this will be addressed at the highest levels." With that, Maya stepped forward and walked toward the jet bridge, her head held high. Behind her, the crowd parted, some clapping softly while others simply stared in awe. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She had made her point, and the airline knew it. But as she settled into her seat in first class, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. What had started as a personal affront had turned into something much bigger, and she wasn't going to let it end here. As Maya settled into her first-class seat, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in, not just for her, but for everyone involved. The ripple effects of her actions were spreading far beyond the confines of Gate 27. Passengers who had witnessed the incident were buzzing with energy, some still filming videos while others huddled together in small groups, discussing what they'd seen. Social media was already lighting up with posts and hashtags about the ordeal, turning what had started as a personal confrontation into a public spectacle. Back at the gate, chaos reigned. The airline staff scrambled to regain control of the situation, but it was clear they were fighting an uphill battle. Passengers grew increasingly impatient as delays mounted, their frustration boiling over into complaints and demands for explanations. Some directed their anger at the airline employees, while others voiced support for Maya, applauding her courage and determination. One older woman approached the counter, leaning in to address the flustered manager. "You should be ashamed of yourselves," she said firmly. "What you did to that lady was wrong, plain and simple, and now we're all paying the price because of your incompetence." The manager nodded apologetically, though his expression betrayed his growing panic. He glanced around nervously, aware that every move he made was being scrutinized by passengers and recorded on phones. Behind him, junior staff members whispered frantically to each other, trying to figure out how to handle the mounting pressure. Meanwhile, word of the incident continued to spread online. A young man seated near the gate uploaded a video of the confrontation to his social media account, captioning it with the hashtag Airline Bias. Within minutes, the post went viral, sparking outrage across platforms. Comments poured in from people, sharing their own stories of discrimination at airports and airlines. Some recounted being profiled based on their race or appearance, while others talked about facing sexism or outright disrespect simply because they didn't fit the typical image of a first-class traveler. "Why is this still happening in 2023? One commenter wrote. "How many times do we have to call out these companies before they actually change?" Another added, "I'm so proud of this woman for standing up. She didn't let them walk all over her. We need more people like her." The backlash wasn't limited to social media. News outlets picked up the story almost immediately, drawn to the dramatic details and the high-profile nature of the passenger involved. Reporters called the airline's PR department, seeking statements and interviews. Bloggers dissected the incident, analyzing everything from the gate agent's behavior to the broader implications of systemic bias in the travel industry. The airline found itself at the center of a media firestorm, its reputation hanging precariously in the balance. Behind closed doors, executives convened emergency meetings to discuss damage control. Emails flew back and forth outlining potential responses and strategies to mitigate the fallout. One idea floated was issuing a formal apology, not just privately to Maya, but publicly to the world. Another suggestion involved offering compensation to affected passengers, including vouchers or upgrades in hopes of calming tempers. But no matter what plan they devised, one thing was certain. The airline couldn't ignore the storm brewing outside its corporate offices. At the same time, Maya's phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers reached out to express support, praising her for taking a stand. Journalists requested interviews, eager to hear her side of the story directly. For a moment, she considered ignoring the messages and focusing on her upcoming meeting, but something stopped her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about shining a light on a problem that affected countless others. She decided to respond selectively, agreeing to speak with a few trusted journalists who promised to amplify not only her voice, but also the voices of those who hadn't been heard. Her goal wasn't fame or recognition. It was accountability. If she could use this moment to push for meaningful change, then all the stress and frustration would be worth it. Back at the airport, tensions remained high. The delay caused by the incident had disrupted schedules, leading to missed connections and frustrated travelers. Some passengers opted to leave the gate altogether, choosing to book flights with competing airlines instead. Others stayed, determined to see the situation through, but their irritation was palpable. Every announcement over the intercom promising boarding soon only added fuel to the fire. Through it all, the original supervisor, the one who had initially dismissed Maya's concerns, became the face of the controversy. Rumors circulated among both passengers and staff that he had been suspended pending an investigation. Whether true or not, the mere possibility sent a message. The airline was taking this seriously, at least outwardly. By the time the plane finally took off, nearly 2 hours behind schedule, the mood on board was subdued. Passengers chatted quietly, exchanging thoughts about what had transpired. In first class, Maya sat silently, staring out the window as the cityscape faded into clouds below. She felt a mix of emotions: relief that the immediate ordeal was over, pride in standing her ground, and sadness that such a confrontation had been necessary in the first place. But Maya knew this wasn't the end. Far from it. What had happened at the gate was just the beginning of a much larger conversation, one that needed to happen not just within this airline, but across the entire industry. As the plane soared higher, she resolved to keep pushing forward, using her platform to advocate for fairness and equality. The wheels of change had begun to turn, and there was no stopping them now. The days following the incident felt like a whirlwind for Maya. What started as a personal confrontation at the airport had snowballed into a nationwide conversation about bias, discrimination, and accountability in the travel industry. The airline, scrambling to contain the damage, issued a public apology within 24 hours of the event. It was carefully worded, acknowledging the unfortunate circumstances at Gate 27 and promising to investigate the matter thoroughly. "We deeply regret the experience endured by one of our valued passengers," the statement read. "Such treatment is unacceptable and does not reflect the values of our company. We are committed to ensuring that all travelers are treated with dignity and respect." While the apology sounded sincere on paper, Maya knew better than to take it at face value. She'd seen enough corporate apologies in her career to recognize when they were more about saving face than enacting real change. Still, she appreciated the acknowledgement. It was a start, even if it wasn't enough. What followed next was a media frenzy. Reporters from major news outlets reached out, eager to get Maya's perspective on what had happened. Some framed the story as a triumph of resilience, highlighting how she had stood up against unfair treatment. Others dug deeper, exploring the systemic issues that allowed such incidents to occur in the first place. Maya agreed to a few interviews, choosing platforms that aligned with her mission of promoting equity and justice. In one particularly memorable interview, Maya sat across from a seasoned journalist known for asking tough questions. The host opened the conversation by praising Maya's composure during the ordeal. "You handled yourself with such grace under pressure," the host said. "But let's talk about the bigger picture here. This isn't just about one passenger being denied boarding. It's about patterns of behavior that many people have experienced, but haven't had the platform to speak out about." Maya nodded, leaning forward slightly. "Exactly. What happened, to me, wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a larger pattern of bias that exists not only in airlines but in many industries. People are judged based on their appearance, their gender, their race, things that have nothing to do with their worth or their right to be treated fairly." She went on to explain how the incident had affected her personally. "It hurt, honestly. Not because I was denied boarding initially. That happens sometimes and I can deal with inconvenience. But seeing the double standards play out so blatantly, watching someone else get preferential treatment while I was left standing there despite having all my documents in order, that stung. And it made me realize how exhausting it must be for others who don't have the same resources or influence to push back." Her words resonated deeply with viewers, sparking a wave of empathy and solidarity. Social media lit up again, this time with hashtags like "Stand with Maya" and "Equality in Travel." People shared their own stories of discrimination, creating a virtual support network for those who had long felt silenced. One woman recounted being mistaken for cabin crew simply because of her skin tone. Another described how she was repeatedly questioned about her ticket despite traveling business class regularly. These stories poured in from all corners of the globe, painting a stark picture of the challenges faced by marginalized groups in everyday situations. The airline took notice. Faced with mounting pressure, they announced sweeping reforms aimed at addressing the root causes of bias within their operations. Among the changes were mandatory diversity training programs for all employees, revised protocols for handling customer complaints, and the establishment of an advisory board to oversee implementation. They also pledged to hire more diverse leadership teams, recognizing that representation mattered, not just as a token gesture but as a fundamental step toward creating inclusive environments. For Maya, these promises were bittersweet. On one hand, she was encouraged to see the airline taking concrete steps to improve. On the other hand, she couldn't help but wonder if the changes would truly stick, or if they were merely temporary fixes designed to quell public outrage. To ensure accountability, she decided to stay involved. She accepted an invitation to join the advisory board, using her position to advocate for transparency and measurable progress. Meanwhile, the fallout extended beyond the airline itself. Competitors took note of the backlash and began reviewing their own policies to avoid similar controversies. Industry leaders convened panels and summits to discuss ways to combat bias and promote inclusivity. Even government regulators weighed in, calling for stricter oversight of airlines and other service providers to prevent discriminatory practices. Through it all, Maya remained steadfast in her mission. She used her newfound visibility to amplify voices that had long been ignored. In op-eds and interviews, she called attention to the intersectionality of discrimination, how race, gender, socioeconomic status, and other factors often combined to create unique challenges for individuals. She urged companies to move beyond performative gestures and commit to meaningful action. One of her most impactful contributions came in the form of a letter she wrote to the CEO of the airline. Rather than focusing solely on herself, she highlighted the experiences of countless others who had suffered silently. "This moment belongs to all of us," she wrote. "It's an opportunity to learn, grow, and build a future where everyone feels valued and respected. Don't waste it." Her message struck a chord. Employees within the airline began speaking up too, sharing their frustrations about workplace culture and demanding better leadership. Passengers continued to hold the company accountable, monitoring its progress closely and calling out any missteps along the way. Slowly but surely, the tide began to shift. Yet, amidst all the noise and momentum, Maya never lost sight of why. She had spoken up in the first place. This wasn't about revenge or retribution. It was about justice. It was about ensuring that no one else had to endure what she had gone through simply because of who they were. As the weeks turned into months, she found solace in knowing that her actions had sparked something bigger, a movement toward fairness, equality, and humanity. And though the road ahead was long, Maya walked it with purpose, determined to leave a legacy that extended far beyond herself. Months after the incident at the airport, life had settled into a new rhythm for Maya. The whirlwind of media attention and public discourse had slowed, but its impact lingered. What had started as a single moment of defiance had grown into something much bigger, a catalyst for change that reached far beyond the confines of one airline or industry. For Maya, it wasn't just about what happened to her anymore. It was about the ripple effect her actions had created. One crisp morning, she found herself standing on stage at a global leadership summit. The room was packed with hundreds of attendees, CEOs, entrepreneurs, activists, and students, all gathered to hear insights from some of the world's most influential voices. Maya adjusted the microphone in front of her, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "Power isn't always about titles or wealth," she said, her voice calm yet commanding. "True power lies in how we use our influence to make the world better, not just for ourselves but for others. Today I want to talk about perseverance, accountability, and the courage to stand up when things aren't right." The audience leaned forward, captivated by her words. She didn't dive straight into the story of the flight that day. Instead, she painted a broader picture of her journey, the challenges she faced as a Black woman climbing the ranks in a male-dominated tech industry, the moments of doubt, and the victories that reminded her why she kept going. When she finally mentioned the incident at the airport, it wasn't with bitterness or anger. It was with clarity and purpose. "That day I could have walked away," she admitted. "I could have accepted their refusal and boarded the plane quietly. But I knew that doing so would mean letting them win, and not just against me. It would mean allowing the same thing to happen to someone else who might not have the resources or the platform to fight back. So I chose to stand my ground." She paused, letting her words sink in. Around the room, people nodded in agreement. Some scribbled notes, while others simply listened, hanging on to every word. Maya went on to describe the aftermath, the chaos at the gate, the viral videos, the airline's apology, and the sweeping reforms they promised to implement. But she didn't stop there. She talked about the importance of staying vigilant, of holding companies accountable long after the headlines faded. "What happens next is crucial," she emphasized. "It's easy to issue an apology or roll out a new policy, but real change requires consistent effort. It means listening to those who are affected, creating spaces where everyone feels valued, and dismantling systems that perpetuate inequality. That's the work we all need to do. Not just airlines, but every organization, every community, every individual." Her speech struck a chord. People rose to their feet, clapping enthusiastically as she concluded. Journalists rushed to interview her afterward, asking for sound bites and reflections on her message. But Maya didn't stay long. She preferred action over applause. After stepping off the stage, she met privately with a group of young professionals, many of whom were women of color, eager to learn from her experience. During the meeting, one young woman raised her hand hesitantly. "Dr. Rivers, thank you for sharing your story. I've been in situations like that before, where I felt dismissed or overlooked because of who I am. But I never knew how to respond without feeling like I'd make things worse. How did you find the strength to push back?" Maya smiled warmly, leaning closer to answer. "Strength doesn't always come naturally," she replied. "Sometimes it comes from being tired of staying silent, tired of seeing injustice go unchallenged, tired of wondering if anyone will ever care unless you force them to. Standing up isn't easy. It takes courage, resilience, and sometimes even sacrifice. But when you do it, you remind yourself of your worth, and you give permission to others to do the same." Her response earned nods of understanding around the table. The conversation continued, with Maya offering advice and encouragement. By the end of the session, several participants approached her to express gratitude. One man, visibly emotional, said, "You've inspired me to speak up more, both in my personal life and at work. Thank you for showing us what leadership really looks like." As weeks turned into months, Maya continued to channel her energy into advocacy. She partnered with organizations focused on diversity and inclusion, helping them develop strategies to combat bias in workplaces. She also launched a mentorship program aimed at supporting underrepresented groups in the tech industry. Her goal was simple: to create opportunities for others to thrive just as she had done. The airline, too, remained committed to its promises. Regular updates were shared with the public, detailing progress on their diversity initiatives and employee training programs. Independent auditors were brought in to evaluate their efforts, ensuring transparency and accountability. While skepticism lingered among some passengers, many acknowledged the steps being taken as genuine attempts to improve. For Maya, the true measure of success wasn't in the accolades or the recognition, it was in the lives touched along the way. She received messages daily from strangers thanking her for inspiring them to take a stand. A mother wrote to say her daughter now dreamed of becoming a leader like Maya. An elderly man expressed admiration for her courage, saying it gave him hope for future generations. Reflecting on everything that had transpired, Maya realized something profound. The incident at the airport hadn't broken her spirit. It had strengthened it. It taught her that adversity, no matter how painful, could be transformed into opportunity. By refusing to accept mistreatment quietly, she had sent a powerful message. Fairness isn't negotiable, and neither is respect. One evening, as she sat in her office overlooking the city skyline, Maya allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She thought about the countless individuals whose stories mirrored hers, people who had been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed simply because of who they were. And she thought about the legacy she wanted to leave behind. "I may not change the world overnight," she whispered to herself, staring out the window. "But if I can open doors for even a few, then it'll all be worth it." And with that, she turned back to her desk, ready to tackle whatever challenges lay ahead. Maya Rivers wasn't just a CEO, a speaker, or an advocate. She was a beacon of hope, a reminder that standing up for justice, no matter how daunting, could spark movements that transcended borders, industries, and lifetimes. Her journey was far from over, but one thing was certain. The world was watching, and it was changing, one courageous act at a time.